The Silent Neighbor, the real-life horror of the Maple Street murders. In the quiet town of Brimstone Valley, nestled deep in the countryside, Maple Street was known for its serene surroundings. The houses were modest but well-kept, and the neighbors lived peacefully for years. That peace, however, was shattered one autumn night when the grisly discovery of a murder sent the entire town into a spiral of fear. The beginning: strange disappearances. The first to go missing was Emily O'Connor, a 17-year-old high school student. She was last seen walking home from her part-time job at the local diner. Her disappearance shook the town, but no one had any leads. A few weeks later, an elderly woman, Martha Green, vanished from her home on Maple Street. She was well known and loved by everyone in the neighborhood. When her home was searched, all that was left behind was her knitting, still draped over the armrest of her chair, as though she had been interrupted mid-stitch. The police, at first, believed the disappearances were unrelated. They thought Emily might have run away, and that Martha, being old, could have wandered off due to her age. But soon, more people started vanishing, always at night, always from Maple Street. The chilling discovery. It wasn't until the family of George and Lisa Roberts, Maple Street's most respected couple, didn't show up for church one Sunday that the town realized something was horribly wrong. Neighbors knocked on their door, but there was no response. The police were called in, and when they broke into the house, they found the place eerily quiet. The Roberts dog lay in its kennel, untouched and whimpering. The house seemed perfectly in order, until they went down to the basement. There, hidden behind a false wall, was a scene straight out of a nightmare. The bodies of Emily, Martha, and several other missing persons were found, bound, gagged, and murdered in gruesome ways. But the most disturbing part wasn't just the condition of the bodies. It was the way they were displayed, seated in chairs, with their hands placed neatly on their laps, as if they were still living and having a conversation. Among the dead were George and Lisa Roberts, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. But the police noticed something strange. Their skin was pale, yet they hadn't been dead for long. This left one horrifying question. Who had done this, and were they still close? The Silent Neighbor. As the investigation unfolded, one name kept coming up: Henry Kowalski, the quiet, middle-aged man who lived just a few houses down from the Roberts. Henry was known for being reclusive, rarely interacting with his neighbors. He would be seen occasionally tending to his garden or taking out the trash, but no one knew much about him. When the police knocked on his door, Henry appeared calm and collected, even inviting the officers inside. His home was clean, modestly furnished, and nothing seemed out of place. However, the air felt thick with tension, as though the walls themselves were hiding something sinister. Upon further investigation, the police uncovered a hidden trapdoor in Henry's living room, leading to an underground cellar. What they found below was horrifying: a soundproof room, filled with tools, ropes, and a large freezer. Inside were the remains of several other missing persons, chopped into pieces and stored like meat. The horror deepened when they discovered Henry's journals, detailed accounts of his gruesome crimes. He had been killing for years, luring victims from Maple Street into his home, where he would torture and murder them. His method was calculated. He would wait for the perfect moment when his victims were most vulnerable, then strike without hesitation. What made Henry even more terrifying was his ability to blend into the community, playing the role of the harmless, silent neighbor. The terrifying conclusion: Henry Kowalski was arrested and later confessed to all the murders. He showed no remorse, even going as far as to tell investigators that he enjoyed the control he felt over life and death. When asked why he displayed his victims in such a macabre way, he chillingly replied, "I like to keep them company." The town of Brimstone Valley was left in a state of shock and fear for years. The once peaceful Maple Street had become a symbol of terror, and people could no longer trust their neighbors. Henry's house was demolished, but the nightmares of his crimes lived on in the minds of those who remained. To this day, many still wonder how such evil could hide in plain sight, masked by the quiet of a suburban street. The case of the Maple Street murders remains one of the most horrifying and chilling in the town's history, a reminder that sometimes the real monsters live next door. The Silent Killer, the case of Jamie's disappearance. It was a quiet evening in the town of Hilford, a place where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. Jamie, a 12-year-old boy, was riding his bike around the block, just like he did every evening. He promised his mother he'd be home by dinner, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jamie never returned. Panic set in when his mother called his name and only silence answered. The investigation begins. The next morning, the town woke up to the news of Jamie's disappearance. Police began searching, but no one knew where the boy had gone. His bike was found abandoned at the edge of the woods, with no other signs of struggle. Flyers were posted around town, and search parties combed the forest, but Jamie was nowhere to be found. As days passed, a lead came from a neighbor who recalled seeing Arthur Kane, a mentally unstable man known for strange behavior, lurking near the woods that evening. Arthur had lived in Hilford for years, but always kept to himself. Whispers about his erratic actions circulated, but no one ever paid much attention until now. Arthur's disturbing past. The police interviewed Arthur, who lived in a decrepit house at the edge of town. The officers found him calm, almost eerily so, as he welcomed them inside. His house was dark, cluttered with old newspapers, and a faint, rotting smell lingered in the air. Arthur denied knowing anything about Jamie's disappearance, but his cold eyes told a different story. The officers left, but something felt off. Digging into Arthur's history, they uncovered a disturbing past. He had spent time in a mental institution for violent tendencies as a teenager. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and released after treatment, but many suspected his mind had never truly healed. The police were convinced they had their prime suspect, but had no concrete evidence to make an arrest. A horrifying discovery. Weeks passed with no progress until one of the search teams stumbled upon something horrifying. In the woods, just a mile from where Jamie's bike was found, they uncovered a shallow grave. It was hidden beneath a pile of leaves and branches, hastily covered. Inside, they found Jamie's lifeless body, wrapped in a tattered old blanket. His face was pale, his eyes wide open, frozen in fear. Autopsy reports showed that Jamie had been strangled, but there were no signs of a struggle. The chilling part? Jamie had been dead for only a few days, despite being missing for weeks. This meant he had been held captive, somewhere, for over a week before he was killed. The investigation heats up. The discovery of Jamie's body sent shockwaves through Hilford. Rumors spread, and Arthur Kane became the town's boogeyman. Police ramped up their investigation, searching his property and scouring every inch of his home, but they found nothing linking him directly to the crime. However, a local teenager named Ryan, who used to mow Arthur's lawn, mentioned something strange during questioning. He had seen a locked room in Arthur's house that no one was allowed to enter. Arthur had warned him that the room was forbidden, and Ryan, out of fear, never asked again. This tip reignited the case. The breakthrough. With this new information, the police obtained a warrant and returned to Arthur's home. When they broke into the locked room, the air felt thick with dread. Inside, they found disturbing evidence: old photographs of children from around the neighborhood, newspaper clippings about missing persons, and Jamie's missing shoes, neatly placed in a corner. The walls were covered in incoherent scribbles, talking about voices and instructions. In the middle of the room was an old wooden chair, with chains attached to the arms and legs, stained with something dark. Arthur Kane was immediately arrested. When questioned, he offered no resistance, but his responses were chilling. He spoke about the voices that told him what to do. He described keeping Jamie locked in the room for days, feeding him scraps, until the voices told him it was time to end the boy's life. He claimed no remorse, only that it was meant to be. The trial and shocking confession. The trial was one of the most sensational in Hilford's history. Arthur Kane sat emotionless as the gruesome details were revealed. Witnesses recounted his strange behavior over the years, and psychologists debated his mental state. Was he truly insane? Or had he been hiding behind his illness to justify his monstrous acts? During the trial, Arthur made a horrifying confession that shook everyone to the core. Jamie wasn't his first victim. He revealed that years ago, a similar incident had occurred in a nearby town, but the body was never found. Arthur had perfected his methods over the years, always listening to the voices, always careful, until now. The jury quickly found Arthur guilty, but there was no sense of relief. The people of Hilford would never forget the boy who went out for a bike ride and never came home, nor the monster who had been hiding in plain sight for years. The aftermath: Arthur Kane was sentenced to life in a high-security mental facility. His house was torn down, and the land was left barren, as if the earth itself wanted to forget the horrors that had taken place. But the memory of Jamie and the sinister secrets of Hilford would haunt the town forever.